is up? I'm Rick, the Fat Man GM. You may or may have not have heard of me babbling and rambling on a few of the YouTube channels and Facebook channels regarding to our hobby, role-playing games in general, tabletop games, wargaming, so on, etc. I have started back when I was in my early teens. I have well over 40 years worth of experience in this hobby that we love and share. And a big part of what I like to do is go back and revisit a lot of the stuff that I have and have accumulated in my gaming career, if you will. And everything from MERP, Starfleet, from FASA, a slew of Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun, Star Wars, etc., etc., etc. And I revisit these items individually, and hopefully to give some nostalgia for myself, to give you a little bit of an insight into some game system that you may or may not have heard of or may have not had the opportunity to play, and to remind those of us out there that do have them that these are quite viable and still entertaining today. So here we go. Alright, this is Return to Axanar. For those of you who are into the Trek universe, you may or may not be aware on YouTube that there are a movement to create a number of fan fics or fan videos or fan movies, and one of the top of the line is the 4-Year Wars, or the Battle of Axanar, or however it's played out. And of course the big studios are in argument mode with them, and I think a lot of times the big money people at power, the studio people, have a tendency to miss the bus on a lot of things that the fans like. Disney is learning that lesson the hard way. They tried to cater to a whole new universe, and they're discovering that the new generation of younger people don't really care and are not as invested in the franchise as my generation, who grew up and lived and breathed it, and they stuck their nose up at and more or less did one of these things to us over and over and over again. Not that most of their movies have been good movies. Several have been actually very good movies. I'm sorry to say that Solo took a hit at the box office, but that was mostly as a protest from the fan base, those old codgers like me who really enjoyed the movie. I liked it. Rogue One was an excellent movie from the Star Wars franchise. It's just an excellent movie. But trying to butcher the old school system and old school actors the way they did, Disney really did a disservice. And there was much better ways, many better ways to approach a new set of trilogies to bring the Skywalker saga to an end. I have no issue with that either, right? So when we look at Star Trek, it's the same problem. There was this reboot of Star Trek, and they brought in different directors with completely different ideas, and I don't really think those people who they asked to direct, whether it was Star Wars or Star Trek, understood the movie genre, the series, the franchise, nearly as well as they should have. And if they had, they would have approached them a little different. There was other issues, of course. There's always issues, and it's not about making something new or altering stuff to the point where they can claim it as their own. It's remembering the roots and the fan base and who paid for the majority of those movies to be successful, and to just kick them in the nads that way is not a good business model. And I'm not going to get into a big argument on the social justice warrior craze or this women's empowerment craze, because there are powerful women in the movies and in TV series and in novels, and there always have been. They've been played down, perhaps. They may have been ignored unjustly, but they've been there all along and were well played. Now, Lieutenant Uhura in the original TV series is a grand example of that. It wasn't striving to make it in your face. I don't know what. The current Rey is infallible for Star Wars. She is completely incapable of growth in the movie sense. She has no flaws and is perfect in every sense of the way. And this is Frankie, our rescue cat, right? Who spent so much time during my last video crying outside the door, I thought I'd let her in the door. As long as you don't step on the keyboard. Here, come say hi to the nuts. Come on. Now, come on. Say hi to everybody. See? You see? She's not quite a lap cat. Not quite Gara. She's nuts. I'm nuts. But she's a lovable person, and she had a rough story. I did that in my previous video, so I'll not repeat it here. Anyway, what I was saying is that there's a lot of room in for old stuff, and to continue the old franchises in new ways to make them connect with the old systems. And then there's lots of opportunities that are like the fan-based Axanar movie, and I'm not pronouncing it right, I know, that they're trying to get produced for the wide range of stuff that we have in Star Trek. The Star Trek universe, just like the Star Wars universe, is so vast. There's so much room for different scenarios, right? This is one of the reasons that set Deep Space Nine apart from all the previous Star Trek material that had come forward, was because they come at it from a completely different angle. They decided to have a fixed location instead of a moving location. The fixed location was in the backwater of the frontier at that time, and had in a war-torn area between not so much foes, but not friends of the Federation either. And until later, the Cardassians became a bigger problem. The Federation had knocked heads with the Cardassians more than once, and then when the Dominion War breaks out, things get even worse. But in the original TV first series, it's, to me, it's so much better than than Voyager. When Voyager followed DS9, I was disappointed, and not so much with the acting or the stories, just they chose to basically reboot and then lose them kind of scenario from the original stuff. We're going to have another 5-year mission, survey, exploration mission, except we're going to have them get lost on the other side of the galaxy and run into this, that, and the other thing. That's fine. And then we come to the Discovery series, and there's some good stuff in Discovery, but I lost interest in it fairly quickly. I have not watched the entire first season, let alone the follow-ups. It may have improved, but I got a limited amount of time, and I want my time is valuable to me. And the fact that when I saw the rebirth of yet another version of Klingons, I just threw my hands up and tuned off, because that's not the thing I wanted to see. So, return to Axanar, whatever, is your typical military-based adventure module, and it goes on about some basic information in the introduction. Yeah, see, it says here, USS Cooper is currently operating on Starbase 23, just completed a difficult patrol overdue for shipboard repairs and shore leave. Despite this, in section New Orders, the captain is told to travel to Alcanus Federation base near the Klingon neutral zone, where an important scientist awaits the transport to Axanar. As the Cooper proceeds to Arcanus, the ship picks up a general transmission for Starfleet Command, quoted a lack of interest. Apparently the Organians are no longer enforcing the Federation Klingon peace treaty, and all ships are ordered to be especially alert. Upon arrival, the group discovers that Starfleet misunderstood the scientists they were assigned to pick up. Due to a faulty base transmitter, no deposit, no return, the eccentric genius absolutely refuses to leave with the Cooper, but he reveals his theory about a Klingon base located on the planet Axanar and insists that the characters investigate. The Cooper's forced to spend the next several months traveling towards Axanar in a search for the alleged Klingon base. As the ship travels toward Axanar in the scenario the long way around, enters the jurisdiction of Starbase 14, where an old enemy of Cooper's commander is now in charge. An especially obnoxious Tellarite, Guthar, will make things difficult for Cooper's crew as long as they're in this area space. When they reach arrival on Axanar, the next to last scenario, or one of those scenarios anyway, the player's characters have difficulties with a number of Axanar's cultural mission. A native-born science officer, in addition to being egotistical, has caused a major administration blunder in the group, tries to find and correct, and so on and so forth. So one thing is the point here is Return to Axanar is designed for Starfleet Military Operations Command personnel serving aboard the USS Cooper Baker-class destroyer. Now, in early beta canon, it was given that the Starfleet actually had a military arm whose whose mission was to patrol, protect, and defend Federation interests, territory, and people, and an exploration arm, which is what the Enterprise was actually part of, although it seemed to cross over into the diplomatic arm of Starfleet on quite a few occasions, and when necessary and needed was tapped as a military vessel. But the fact was that Starfleet actually included a core military organization and a military command whose purpose was to train and to be armed and equipped with ships of war. And at some point, if you go through the collage of Star Trek canon, which is altered from each different incarnation of Star Trek, or varied from one creator to the next, and with the beta canon, which is mostly things like this and fan provided material, but game related stuff and things like that is often considered beta canon, that the goals and plans for Starfleet had evolved to the point of not being military based, were being civilian exploration, customs patrol kind of stuff, and then if necessary to be tapped as a defending conquest or defending force. The idea was to go with the Federation's dogma on being all about negotiations and diplomacy and putting a good foot forward with anybody and everybody they encountered, and to the best of their abilities defending themselves in the Federation was a second priority. So we go setting the stage, briefing. It says here the Cooper is currently heading towards Starbase 23, current base of operation, approximately 2 light years from its destination. The vessel is traveling at warp 4 and should arrive at the base just under 11 days. Here goes the vessel's commander, Commodore William Mansfield, and the crew have just concluded an exhausting 7-month patrol, the second operational mission since the Cooper entered service. Aside from numerous small system failures common to newer vessels, the Starship had the misfortune of monitoring several ion storms during its patrol. These storms did extensive damage to a number of major shipboard systems, particularly the transporter and life form sensors. These two systems now only operate intermittently. Also, just 2 weeks ago, Cooper received a brief call for assistance from row Macarsis 4 or 6. Receiving no additional information, the landing party beamed down while the ship's transporters were functioning. Landing party arrived. They found themselves in the middle of a civil war in a politically divided world. Not permitted by Starfleet regulations to intervene, the party was forced to escape from a battlefield. Before they were able to return to the ship, however, transporters malfunctioned again, requiring an emergency rendezvous with both the Cooper shuttles. Native weapon fire damaged the shield integrity on one shuttle, and its crew, consisting of several security guards and a junior science officer, was killed when the shuttle's life support system failed to maintain atmosphere breathable pressure. Tractor beam retrieved the shuttle, but repairs have not yet been completed, leaving the Cooper with a single operating shuttle. So already we have a questionably dodgy destroyer. One shuttle out of 2, and half it sounds like a lot of key sensor and abilities. The ability to teleport is limited at best. Briefing, new orders, officers' reports. So for the next 10 days, Cooper proceeds uneventfully. New orders is signal coded blue, signifying urgent but not immediately imperative. Commodore Mansfield is liberty to receive the message personally or share it with the group. Basically, what they're doing is they're diverting him to go pick up they think as a scientist or a specialist, to take him to Axanar in search of evidence of a Klingon base and the potential buildup of Klingon forces, and reroute. It's been a couple more months in warp. That's always nice. It's like, how do you role play that? When you're role playing, it's like traveling overland in a fantasy setting. We're going to go from here. We're going to go from this town to where the dungeon's at, and it takes 3 weeks to travel. Except we're just going to snap our fingers and we're leave here, and there we're there. And we maybe do a little resource management and spend the X amount of supplies and material or whatever, instead of having 3 or 4 weeks of travel adventure where we're actually traversing that distance and running into encounters and interesting terrain and so on and so forth. It's a matter of taste and flavor for the game master and the players. Officer's report. Says there he's got no choice. If Commodore Mansfield contacts Commodore Namachi to raise his objection, he could receive another transmission in less than an hour at the warp 15 speed of sub-base communications. Starbase 23 is only 7 minutes away. Even so, Nekomachi's answer comes with unexpected speed, which is perhaps indicates that she anticipated the objection. There are no other ships currently available to replace you. The U.S. blah blah, and the U.S. blah blah, and the USS blah blah blah. Your vessel is to continue with the mission. It's an imperative. You get disquieting news. Aside from complaints by crew members, the loss to serve shore leave. First week of the trip is uneventful. During the second week, however, communications officer overhears a sort of subspace message between private merchant vessels traveling close to the Klingon border. Many of the transmissions are routine, dealing with current prices, value of trade goods on various words, and the current status of the Federation stock market. This particular interest is in a corporation called Crescent and Trifold Developments, and how this company is rumored to be constructing something called a neural exciter based on non-Federation design. If someone checks the computer records for the information on the company, they'll learn it is a fairly new company chartered on Rigel 8 or Orion, specializing in non-conventional electronic circuitry. Then we got lack of interest. This is informing the captain that the high level, the race originally referred to as the Organians, who had enforced the neutral zone creation between the Federation and the Klingons, and ended the original, the second, what could have been a second Klingon Federation war, has stopped intervening or interfering, depending on who you ask, leaving the whole area up for grabs, and who's to know who's going, and so Federation is now trying to figure out exactly what the Klingons are going to, or how they're going to react, let alone what they're going to do. So no deposit, no return. Last 4 days of the trip are uneventful. They get to this particular scientist and specialist to discover he has a bunch of useful information, but absolutely refuses to leave the planet, and at no time did he ever tell Federation he was going to do so. It says Hardowitz will politely decline any invitation to return to the Axanar with the group, insisting they must carry out the instructions on the message. Even if pressed, the scientist will absolutely refuse to leave his isolated lodging, saying his current work must not be interrupted for any reasons. And the long way around, talking basically about the travel fixed time event. This is where we start running into issues with the Terralite. Jarve go through an old adversary at Commodore Mansfield, commander of Starbase 14, who starts trying to intervene and to micromanage and cause other kind of issues with the mission and the Commodore and the ship and the crew. Then we got arrival of Axanar, landing on the planet, a tour, encountering the locals, dealing with them, searching for clues, trying to find this Klingon base or Klingon spies or whatever. Moving on, young thief, mouth of base, extra story, wilderness preparations, child becomes lost. It's necessary to send search parties back down the service. Lieutenant Winter feels she could identify the child again if once found. Transporters are not working, so there may only be one search party per operational shuttlecraft, which we only have one. Should there be more than one crew? Because unless you manage to repair the other one, the highest appropriate skill rating for their attempt. Commodore Mansfield notified Commodore Guthrie and developments and messages will come back in 10 days, and making Mansfield stop playing games with the children and follow the early instructions to come to the base. Necessary Commander Bushwalter points out Mansfield that they are following orders to investigate on instructions of Commodore Nanachi and the Federation Council. Otherwise, the good Starbase commander can sit and spin. Search party procedures, wilderness preparations. Excuse me again, I got a slightly runny nose this morning. Just ask for any information. Faxer responds by saying that all is all he knows, but he offers to take them to the cave. He thinks he can remember the way. Showing him a map is useless. He refuses to travel aboard the shuttle. It's the only way he can guide the group as they travel on foot. If asked to bring the group to the Iceman, Faxer will surely answer that when he saw the man in ice, he was so scared and immediately ran away. Choosing the landing party, choosing equipment. Now, someone may mention the possibility of locating Klingon bases using Cooper sensors. Any attempt will be unsuccessful. For one reason, there is no equipment in operation at the base, and therefore no power being consumed. For another reason, the amount of refined metal in the Klingon equipment is not sufficient to present a clear sensor reading, and the metal ore in the hill where the cave is located with further obscure readings. Captain Wiggin will be shocked when she learns that the Klingon base does exist on Axanar. Main concern is the failure of the mission to have records that would have contain information on this possibility. She's asked for complete logs of the group's activities and actually given a chance to send a member of the mission with the party. She will decline, saying her current shortage personnel prevents it. Commander Buckwalter suggests having all search parties return to the shuttlecraft to the Cooper. The remainder of the day can be spent shuttling up members of the search parties and shuttling down personal equipment for the wilderness party. Choosing the landing party, the equipment, private hideaway, the cave's interior. Landing party finally reaches the cave containing the Klingon quote base. In front of them is a rough natural opening. Large tree about 25 meters tall, leaves shaped like old-fashioned wire brushes. Faxer becomes both excited and sad seeing the cave again, though he's glad he could make up for the borrowing the communicator. Realizes the bodies of his friends are, so far as he knows, still inside the cave. The interior of the cave, the secret of the cave. Along the back wall of the cave is one piece of equipment. and 3 separate packets of bulky Duro paper documents written in Klingonese, some clothes and a few minor personal effects of extremely worn condition, and it had an expanded pirate pack and a small electronic diary. Any character with a rating of 20 or more in personal weapon technology recognizes the pirate pack belongs to an old model Klingon disruptor, perhaps dating back to the time of the 4-Year War. Skill and procedures, Klingon records and equipment, what really happened. There's no genuine Klingon base when a single Klingon transport landed in Axanar prior to the formal declaration of 4 Years' War. Genetic scientist was in charge of the secret squad with orders from a senior Klingon administrator to establish a Klingon genetic facility on Axanar. Coming when it did, Captain Garth's attack interfered with the plans to construct the installation. The teaching machine and some most important documents were unloaded and hidden when Starfleet captured the transport. The construction materials it contained almost all the Klingons. Our job happened to be in an Axanarian village at the time of capture. Though through skillful evasive tactics, he was never captured. The Klingon lived alone on Axanar for 22 years until his accidental death by exposure 3 years ago. His body, which may be discovered by this group, is the one frozen to block ice. Klingon records and equipment, much of detail, distress call, coming and going, out of touch. Still dealing with bad weather. Last contact, Klingon attack. Klingons now really stern chase, long chase. This is a long module with a lot of stuff going on. Trial. Eventually they get hauled back to Starbase 14, where the Terralite Guther will try to basically concoct all kinds of nasty things and hold a trial to either get the Commodore kicked out or get his court-martialed. Surprise, the evidence. Then we got the wilderness map for the area, and then we got a number of Starship and Federation Klingon warship stats. It's always like these days. Always on the lookout for one that doesn't show up in this ship guides, which is rare. They do have the cast of characters, NPCs, lots and lots of them. We got library data on Axanar itself, history, game master notes, creating suspense, timeline, running a large group, transit table, mechanics of play, little bits and tips on game mastering casualties, morale, fatigue, and efficiency, determining fatigue effects, the missions of the Klingon scout ship, various plants and animals found on Axanar, further adventures. There we have Return to Axanar. See, I always thought some of these have evolved. The very earliest modules and game source books were very thin and left a lot up to the GM, and then we came out with a new generation where it was overemphasized. They overloaded it with a lot of stuff that was to take that creative flow out of the GM's hands to some degree. And then we've come back a full circle again with some of the newer stuff where we get a little better rounded options. In this particular one, I think there's plenty of room for ad-libbing or tweaking to your flavor. Plus, you could still reuse this in a newer system, in my opinion. There's always a change of venue. Perhaps the timeline can be updated, the ships can be updated, so on and so forth. But there you have it. Return to Axanar